Welcome to the Intentional Guy Podcast, where we are driven to help men become more intentional and purposeful in their daily lives. Your host, Michael Chestnut, will interview amazing guests to get insight and glean wisdom from, so we can integrate intentional living and lead happier, healthier, and more fulfilling lives. All right, let's get started with the show.
Hey guys, welcome to Intentional Guy. Today, I am excited about this episode. You know, I told you that every year I take 4 guys from my church that have been an influence, or you see God doing incredible things, and bring them on the podcast to show them. Today, I am excited because I have my good friend Brian Case here today. How you doing today,
Good.
Brian? Well, Brian, listen, I'm pumped. Brian is our care pastor at church. He runs Blackwater campus, our prison ministry.
That's right.
You know, and Brian is this on fire for God guy at our church that you can, whenever you need someone to bring it in, Brian's going to bring it.
That's
you
right.
know?
Let's go.
And so I like it, and I love his enthusiasm because it's sincere, it's authentic.
Right. That's right.
You know, when I look at you and I see how you can just, I mean, you're like, hey, Jesus can do it.
Damn.
You know, I get pessimistic and say, man, there's no way we do this. Brian's like, ooh,
Yeah.
we can't do it, but God can do it. You
That's
know,
right. That's
and you're
right.
like, man, you know, and it's always with excitement.
Mm-hmm.
But then you see these prayer requests come true because, you know, you're believing and you're going for it. And I love that. And just knowing you has helped me in my life. Brian and his wife were really instrumental several years ago when me and my wife came back to God. We were so far from God. And, you know, long story, make short, but Brian and his wife, they were the first small group that we went to. And Daryl Medlin was leading it.
Yeah.
You were just providing your house.
Right.
And it was a great time for us because you guys planted so many seeds that years later would be cultivated. And right now, we're bearing the fruit of your guys' labor of pouring into our lives. And for me and my wife, I want to say thank you because, you know, you walked that with me. I remember times at Waffle House, me and you meeting
Yeah.
and talking, you know, because I was just struggling because the enemy had me hopeless that I can't be a good husband and father because of where I've been, you know, and I loved how patient you were with me, but how honest too.
Yeah.
You were with me, sitting there at Waffle House those days. You remember those?
Yeah, I do. I remember. It's actually right up here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
And
I
I so much appreciate it. See, it's so important to have
it is
the right kind of men in your life because they can pour truth into you. They can pour God's word into you. But then the example that they have. And that was you. I watched you. You weren't just the one that talked it, man. You have always walked it. You're not perfect.
No, right.
You know.
Right.
But what I love about it is you're authentic.
Yeah.
And that's who I wanted to be. And I'm getting there now. I'm growing. And a lot of that is, to be honest, because you poured into me. Okay. Now, a lot of people at church, they don't know. They see this on fire for God, Brian Case, but they don't know how Brian got to be that guy.
That's right.
And I'd love to know a little bit of your journey.
Yeah.
If you wouldn't mind sharing that with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when Mike reached out to me, he's like, hey, man, I'd love for you to be on this podcast, share a little bit of what God's doing. I just was praying about that because ultimately it comes down to being obedient.
Yeah.
We all have a choice in our life. Everybody knows me by obey the nudge. And that's what I want to impact today is the fact that how did I get to that? My walk with Jesus, I prayed about that. I was like, man, Lord, what do we want to share? So I just want to impact that. Like you said, you know, let's go obey the nudge, you know, at a young age, I'll never forget this. So when I was really little, elementary, that was some of the toughest times in my life. I got bullied quite a bit at school. I was going through some things in my family. You know, I found out right around that time, almost close to middle school that my dad was gay. And so a lot of things were happening. I went to SLD class. So from elementary and middle school, for me, in my past, that was a very mental toughness, not good. But the beauty in that is because I was in church and my mom brought me to church and got to hear the word. That's actually was the beginning of where I started being sensitive to the Spirit. And when I say sensitive to the Spirit, I started, like, when you're in rough times, that's the best time. Yeah. That is the time to lean in with the Lord, because you will grow very quickly. You have an opportunity there in your moment. Okay, this is garbage. This is horrible. And that's what you're thinking. And either you lean in and you believe and you let the Holy Spirit guide you and teach you and grow you with your walk, or you get mad at God and you go the other way. And then eventually, because God's so patient, he will eventually grab you. So that's what I wanted to share. I wanted to share at a young age, man. I'll never forget it. Worship songs. Why not even worship songs? I used to listen to songs, and they weren't all Christian songs, but it was in the times where I was crying and I'd be bullied, and I come home and I try to share that with my mom, and I go in my room, and I had other issues as well. We all have issues. I would listen to songs, and I started hearing, and then I don't hear God audibly, but I hear him in here. That's when I say obey the nudge. Like, this started in elementary school, to where I just started hearing him through songs. I listened to a song. I'm like, is that you, Jesus? Is that you, Lord? And they'd be like, and it just, so, and it didn't happen overnight. It was a process. So that's one thing I want to share with you guys, that, you know, when you see someone on fire and let's go and all that, you know, that didn't happen overnight. But at the same time, however hungry you are, don't get discouraged either. It don't have to take I'm 39. So it doesn't have to take 30 years either. It's how bad do you want Jesus? How bad do you want him? Are you going to him? Are you like constantly with every situation? So at a young age, I just started first sensing his Spirit. And then as I got to middle school, I started praying. And I just would pray certain things. I mean, why not? If I had a nudge in my spirit, I would walk and God would just nudge me. Hey, man, pray that. I mean, you've got nothing to lose at that point except grow your faith. You don't have to tell people what God's nudging you to pray. You just be obedient. Right. And watch what God does. So fast forward up to, like you said, the community group. When I got to the community group, still to this day, even like this, I told Mike, it's out of my comfort zone, but this is Jesus. This is Jesus' story, so I'm doing it. But for community group, I remember we were in community group, and Daryl saw something in me. He said, man, I think you ought to lead a community group. And I'm like, dude, heck no. Like, I can't lead no community group. I can't do any of that. But like what you said, when you're surrounding yourself around people that see something in you and they call the greatness out of you, at that point, when he said that, then I got a nudge, and the Lord, like, you need to do it. Yeah. And if I would not have obeyed that, I don't truly believe I would be where I am today, because by me being obedient to one community group in my little mind, looking back, that was one of the biggest moments for me as far as really where God's put me now as a campus leader at Blackwater and care pastor and all these other things, because he's got to start somewhere. Yep. I mean, everybody don't just start up here. I mean, sometimes that might happen, but man, everyone starts somewhere. Yep. So,
and we each have our journey.
Yes.
You know, and like I remember back in those days when that was going on, because you're like, man, there's no way I would ever do this. But it's amazing, because look where you're at today. Yeah. Look at what God's doing in your life. Yeah. And it's tremendous, you know, and I love the fact that you're such a prayer warrior. You know, before we even came on here, me and Brian prayed over something personal in my life. And I love that, because Brian is one of those guys that we can go to and say, hey, let's pray. But Brian, I know there's been a lot of things in your life too.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
You had open heart surgery.
Yes.
You had things like that. And, you know, I remember Daryl was one of those guys that walked the journey with you.
Yeah.
I know there's other men who walked that journey with you because there's been some scary times in your life. I remember one time in group you saying, I'm going to die this year. And I'm like, and there were some things, there were some fears and stuff that the enemy was attacking you. And that's one reason why I do this podcast, Brian, is because I know that there's some guys sitting out there that feel defeated. They feel alone and they don't know where to start, but you have a story of hope with you. Can you tell us a little bit about that time period? And
So back then, like Mike said, I've had a couple different open heart surgeries. I actually had open heart surgery right when I was born. Like literally, I want to say, I've asked my mom this multiple times. You think I would remember? It's either 3 weeks or 3 months. I want to lean around the 3-week part because I was actually born with a congenital heart defect. So right out of the gate, I'm already flying to Birmingham to have open heart surgery right when I'm born.
Wow.
And that's kind of been, I've had over 11 surgeries. So I'm 39. I've had over 11 surgeries. 3 of them were open heart surgery when I was born. I've had 2 since in my 30s. That's what you're saying. And multiple different ways. But what I'm saying is the hope in that. I'll never forget that because, like I said, I've been able to kind of hear the Holy Spirit at a young age, and I'll never forget when I was on at the river. So Ashley is my wife. Her dad just had open heart surgery a month prior to this time. I haven't told a lot of people this story, but let's go Jesus. So a month before Ashley's dad had open heart surgery, and I'm at the river. And I'll never know this till I get to heaven. Right. And this is how it goes. I'm sitting there and I felt in my spirit, you're going to have open heart surgery and you're not going to make it. At this time, nobody's told me I had to have nothing. That's boom, okay. And I'm like, that was probably the first time that I acted like I didn't hear that. Like I didn't want to hear that. I'm not going to live like I don't hear that negative ghostwriter. Like normally when I sense from something from the Lord, yes, Lord. Okay. But on this one, I'm like, and then on top of that, well, you're going to have open heart surgery. You're not going to make it. And I need you to write a journal to your family. I'm not doing, I just acted like I did not even hear that. My wife did not know that. A month later, I go for my normal heart checkup. I've been doing that since I've been born because I've had heart issues since I've been born. Normal heart checkup. I go in there and the heart doctor tells me, hey, so since you hadn't really been listening with the whole working out thing, your heart's getting enlarged and you're going to have open heart surgery. Now just imagine that. Just let that sit in for a second that you thought you heard something a month before.
Wow.
And then a month later, you're in the hospital. Now, what do you do with that? So I'm not going to tell my wife. I'm still acting like okay. So obviously I go in to have open heart surgery where the night before I go to have open heart surgery, I go on the side of my house and I just start praying. I said, Lord, I didn't write no journal. And I don't want to die tomorrow. I didn't write a journal. I don't want to die tomorrow. My wife is just now a baby Christian. She's not going to understand if you take me. If I go, okay, I get to be with Jesus. But my wife's not going to understand, and I want to be able to raise my kid to know you at a high level. I said, you let me live tomorrow, and the rest of my days, I will do whatever you want me to do. So, I literally interceding, pray over there by the garbage can. Wake up the next morning, I'm driving to have open heart surgery. My wife's in the car, and my dad flew down for it, and we're listening to this song, "Here's My Heart, Lord." That was really popular back then. Here's my heart, Lord. And I looked at my wife, and I said, take pictures today. I can't. Now, she still does not know. I'm not going to tell. I would be a fool to tell my wife I'm not going to make it today.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I'm still
Right.
hoping that I'd make it today. So anyways, fast forward, I almost don't make it. Everybody, I don't know if a lot of people know the story. It was supposed to be an easy procedure. Turns into 11 hours. Wow. It was only supposed to be 6 hours. Our whole Momentum Church family at that time was at the hospital, Sacred Heart Hospital. I don't know if you know much about open heart surgery. So your blood still has to go through your body.
Right.
So they have to filter it through a machine. Well, you can only be on that machine for so long. It thins your blood out.
Oh.
So after you've reached the time of your blood being thin, there's nothing. So they came out there multiple times to my wife and told her, hey, it's going bad. It's not working. More and more people come up there interceding, praying. Short story. I think there's like 5 to 10 minutes left, and they come out there and they tell my wife and Pastor Tim, and they put them in a room, and they say, I know y'all are praying, but if something don't happen in the next 5 to 10 minutes, he's done for.
Wow.
There's nothing. Well, obviously I'm here. There were some things that got messed up. I have a pacemaker out of it. But why do I share that story? I share that story because that's another reason where this extra fire and excitement came from. Because I still remember 9 years ago when I sat on the side of a house and begged Jesus to not take my life. And I'm alive. And that's why I go crazy for Jesus, because I know that truly every day that I'm alive is truly a gift from him. Like I said, I don't know. I'll never know when I get to heaven if that truly was, if I was going to die that night or not. I don't know. I don't know if by me going over there pleading, I don't know. But I don't really care. All I know is I've made a promise to King Jesus. Right. You keep me alive, and I'm going to slay this thing for you. So that's actually where the extra fire, and that's why I am willing to get out of my comfort zone. I'm willing to be a little more bold. I'm willing to obey nudges, because ultimately, in my mind, I'm not supposed to be here. Yeah. So I haven't shared a lot of people that story, because sometimes people don't quite understand that. But that's actually the kick fire that's really jumped my excitement, because when you're thankful to be alive, and you think you weren't supposed to be here, that kind of does something to you.
It does. And as I'm sitting here thinking, I think that was one of the things that drew me to you, because I came to know, I met you after all of that. And when I came in, I was this guy. Now, I wasn't hearing that God was going to kill me tomorrow, in a heart surgery or something like that. But I had this voice in my head saying, God can't use you, that, you're done, and I didn't want to think that the best of my life was over. Right. And when I met you, it sparked hope inside of me, because I remember you sharing that story, telling us about it. I remember just many of the conversations, and like you said, we see the guy now, but we don't see the broken guy, the journey, getting there. And some of these guys listening right now, they're on the journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some are at that crossroad. Do I take the journey? Yeah. Or do I give in? Yeah. And then others, they're trudging through this journey. And I'll be honest with you, Brian, I didn't know this type of joy existed.
Right.
I didn't. When I met you, I didn't have this joy. Right.
Right.
And really just not until the last 3-4 years has that really taken root. It was actually, I had growth.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until that our major car wreck.
Yep.
And when that car wreck happened,
Right.
and I could feel the tank of that tanker truck getting out and realizing I should be dead right now, but I'm not.
Right.
I remembered something my mom said to me one time, right after all this fall happened. My mom said, God must have something great for you, for the enemy to be fighting you so hard.
Right.
And I had that moment, just like you, that, man, I survived. I'm going to be that man.
Right.
I'm going to be that man.
That's right.
And it was that wake up call for me that, you know what? If I'm not, I'm going to at least die trying to be that man.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm going to fight. I'm going to forge my way through. And for me, that has been surrounding myself with the right men. So if you could tell us a little, who are those men in your life?
No, dude, that's huge. So who are the men? So the 5 that I love, I tell you what, man, I want to at least say something to that as well. What I've been learning a little bit in my life, I don't know it all by no means. I try to have a learning spirit. But what God's been showing me the past couple of years is sometimes there's seasons in your life. And sometimes you're in a season and God's got these certain men around you. And that's phenomenal. And then sometimes as you go on in different seasons, either God sometimes keeps those men, or sometimes 2 or 3 might come out and but God puts 2 or 3 new in. So I say that to say, it's not a bad thing. It's just that, sometimes don't think everyone's not, I don't know where I heard this, probably from Pastor Tim or someone, but basically, everybody's not meant to do your journey with you the whole time.
Yeah.
Something along that line. So, I think that trips us up. It tripped me up.
Right.
I'm just going to be real. A couple years ago, the people like that time in my life, Daryl was definitely one in my top 5 in there. And Daryl's still close to me. I still enjoy Daryl. He's been such a big time in my life. But as we go in different seasons, that was like 10 years ago, So sometimes God will pull one out, put one in, and all that. So as far as right now in the season of my life, and it's probably, as you know, I'm full-time for staff now.
Right.
So I tell you what, man, Pastor Tim, I know he's our pastor, but he's been such a blessing in my life right now. Marty Moore, David Keller. I really enjoy, Tyler for me, Tyler McNeely. He really just, there's so many different people that it's like, these are the people for me that and they're all unique in their own way. Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
They're like, each person is different.
Yeah.
I'll go to this person for someone. I'll go to this person. Even Steve Mendez, he's really helped me. What's the best way to say that? Just believe in myself.
Right.
He'll say that to me. He's like, Brian, you ain't dumb, man. You just haven't learned that yet. Quit. Because I tend to be, I'm getting better. But I tend to be critical. I always just talk down. I don't know why, but I'm getting better at that. And Steve's really helped me with that. He's like, Brian, dude, you're one of the smartest dudes I ever, you want people to help see your blind spot and call you out in a good way.
Yeah.
Quit saying that.
Yep.
You're not, dude.
I did that for the longest
time. You know what I'm
time.
saying?
There wasn't a day go by that I didn't say I was stupid.
Yeah.
And it's from some stuff as in my childhood.
Right.
And I had that self-doubt. But since the car wreck, I got great counseling, got great friendships. Yeah. I really focused on my friendship. Mm-hmm. And I love something that you said.
Yeah.
Because God has these men in our life for a season, right?
Yeah, right.
And one of the things that I like to teach is we need to evaluate our friendships quarterly.
That's good.
Because things change.
Yeah.
People change. Let's look at some of the people in our lives who were very instrumental in getting us to where we are today.
Right.
Who are now far from God. Yeah.
Right.
But God used them in that. I'm thinking of one of the doctors that we know, that I went and I remember God was telling me, go to him and tell him you need to strike up a friendship and you want to be his friend. And I'm like, man, this guy, he's campus pastor. He's a heart doctor. He's too busy for this, right?
Right.
And I'm like, I obeyed the nudge.
That's right. Let's go.
I obeyed the nudge. Woo! And I went in there and I said, hey, I just laid it out.
Yeah.
I just laid it out. And I said, and I was expecting to be rejected in a good way, that they were going to, be kind and all that.
Right.
But you know what happened was his story and my story, I didn't know his story. And mine and his story connected. And we sat there for 2 hours talking. And then from there on, we would get coffee and we would stuff. And what I learned from that man was life-changing. And now that man's not in church.
Yeah.
That man's not there.
Yeah.
And so if we're not careful, the next thing we know, we don't have that layer of 5 people around us.
Right.
So as I'm learning to evaluate that quarterly, because as God changes, and sometimes God changes not because they're far from God. Someone might move.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or they changed a job, or God's called them to a different ministry.
Yeah.
In the church for the longest time, my ministry was kids.
Right.
And I loved it. I had your daughter.
Yeah.
And all that stuff, and I loved it.
Right.
Now my season is working with men.
Yeah.
And it changes. So now I'm not hanging out with all these people who did kids. Now I'm surrounding myself with those people who are doing men's ministry and stuff like that.
Right.
That I can grow from.
Right.
And that I can pour in as they pour into me. Right.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I love that you brought that up, because that's a principle. I always tell them on here, Brian, that we need to be intentional in our life. That was my word I got one year when Pastor Tim told us, pick a word for the year.
I got you.
And I was like, intentional. Now look here, 6 years later, I have a podcast, Intentional Guy.
Yeah.
And we have to be intentional, because the enemy is intentional in wanting to take us out.
Yeah, that's right.
He wants to take each one of us out. And so we have to put strong people in our life. And it doesn't mean we throw away people.
Right.
We still love those people. We're still trying to but they're walking their journey.
Right.
And we don't know what God's got in store for them in that journey. I want to be a part of those journeys, but I also have to be where God called me to be.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
So,
and I want to share some. I just feel nudged to say it's about obedience. The whole Christian life, your whole life is be obedient when God nudges you. And when I say nudge, it's basically when you feel the Holy Spirit tugging at your heart, man, should I go pray with that person? That's not Satan. That ain't Satan telling you to go pray with someone. All right, should I go smart? And that's another thing. I think we get tripped up sometimes. But if I'm not praying with someone, or if I'm not asking something big, then it ain't big. Man, everything, if God nudges you to do anything, it's big in his eyes. Period.
Yeah.
In our little mind, we're like, well, if we're not raising someone from the dead or doing this, then it's not a big deal to Jesus. It's a big deal to Jesus. If he nudged you to do something, if he nudged you to smile at somebody and say, man, how you doing today? Are you having a great day? If that's it, that's a big deal.
That's right.
That's a big deal. So I want to encourage people daily, man. You want to have victory. You want to be excited. It's about just being obedient every single day, and God will give you. It's like you were obedient to make this podcast. This wasn't easy, probably. This was not probably an easy thing, but you know what? You were obedient.
Yeah.
And look what God's doing. You know what I'm saying? So it's just, I just felt like I was supposed to share that. Man. Obedience.
And
man.
I love that, because, so I've been Brian's one of our head deacons, and they asked me to come be a deacon last year, and I've been on that, which is another story, in itself, because when you met me, I was convinced I was done. God would never use me. If anybody ever knew who I was, they would not want me around, right? And so I would try to I would try to push people away,
Yeah, right.
And but this season, Pastor Tim's so wise, breaks us up into small groups, and I was in Chuck Kimball's group, and Chuck is going to be on the podcast too. He's one of those guys I'm bringing on, and but what I love is I'm surrounded by 4 guys and their other deacons, and you're talking about obeying the nudge, right? Mm-hmm. I would come to church. The enemy wants to keep us defeated, so here I I found myself coming to church, and I would get to church just before it started. Slip in the back door, go, sit down, and then kind of wait till everybody kind of get out kind of quickly.
Yeah,
right. Now, this is even now. I mean, this was just up until not too long ago,
Yeah.
because I heard the enemy in my ear saying, that lie again.
Yeah, right.
And I talked to the guys in our small group, and I said something to them, and I love it because I felt God nudging me to say, pour this out to them, tell them this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, God, so I did.
Yeah.
And what I love is they then became Jesus with skin on for me.
Yeah.
And they were like, that's not God. God would never tell you to sneak in and to sneak out. And you're not the same. What I needed to hear from them was, Mike, you're not that same guy that you once were.
That's right.
God has made you different, and you can walk boldly. And so fast forward from when I talked to them that was about 8 months ago.
Yeah.
We had that conversation. Jump forward. We went to Navarre this past week to serve. My wife was serving there, so I went.
Yeah.
And I walked in, and I was like, you know what? I felt the nudge, God saying, you need to go shake people's hands.
That's right.
You need to go introduce yourself. You need to, and I'm like, what? No, I don't want God. But you know what? I went in there, and I didn't. The enemy wanted to come in. I was like, no, because I heard those men saying, no, Mike,
that's right.
That's not God.
That's right.
That's not God.
Right.
And that's not who you are not who you once were.
That's right.
And that is why it's so important to have good, godly men in our life, man.
Right.
How do we get through life without that? We don't. We don't. God has not called us to walk this journey alone.
Right. No, absolutely.
And I'm really excited because as this podcast comes out, I'm working. I'm obeying the nudge again, Brian. All right. Because I've been wanting to do this for a while, and I'm not. So now I'm going to introduce it today.
Yeah, let's
go.
But
at church, we're I'm doing an online men's group.
Yeah.
It's going to meet every other Monday.
There you go.
And we're going to do it on Zoom. We're going to go through my book, More Than a Picture.
That's right.
And it's talking about what we're talking about here.
Right.
So some of you men who are maybe, you're just kind of in a fog in life, and because I was there for many years.
Yeah, right.
You're in a fog, but you want to be intentional. Don't believe the lie that God can't use you, because God can.
That's right.
And so what we're doing in this is we look at the strongholds in our life.
That's right.
And then we look at, prayer.
Right.
And then we talk about what characteristics do you feel God wants you to have? I was a guy who thought I had all this care on all this stuff, but my past was dictating my future, right?
Wow.
Well, my past no longer dictates.
That's right.
Who I am.
Yeah.
No, God dictates that.
Absolutely.
But we have to be intentional and get out of the fog and start asking God, show me these characters. So we go over how to build character and how to cultivate that and keep that going and to be the man God's called you to be.
That's
and
right.
so I want to, obey the nudge.
That's right.
And you guys that are looking for an online, and you don't even have to go to our church to be a part of it. And I'll put in a link in there where you can sign up. But, that's what it's about.
That's what it's about. I really want to jump on that. I'm going to obey a nudge. So if you're watching this and you have a thought, man, I wonder if I should do that. That's the nudge. That's Jesus. There's your answer. Jump on board.
Yeah. And, I was, I'll be honest. There's scared things in me about doing it because, who's going to want to listen to me? Who wants to get in a Bible study with me?
Right.
God, what if God only brings one person?
Yeah.
How about if no one else shows up?
Yeah.
If God just brings one person, then I'm going to build that relationship with that one person, and that's who God meant for it to be.
That's right.
Right? And I love what you just said. If God's telling you to do that, obey the nudge. What do you got to lose? Every other week, it's going to be at 7 o'clock Central Standard Time.
That's right.
We're in Pensacola, so we're going to be at 7 p.m. and doing it, so it's great.
And you got a lot to give in that group, Mike. I've seen you grown. Like you said, I've known you, and just from when I first met you,
Mhm.
Now, I didn't know you before that, obviously. So
No, but you did get to meet the broken Mike.
right, and then now to see where you're at right now, man. And I know you say you're thankful for me being a part of that, but I'm thankful to see how far you've come.
Mm.
You don't always get to see that in people, man. You don't always get to see
The fruit.
the fruit, and the fact just your fruit. It's just crazy. That's one thing you hang on to in life is when you build a relationship, and whether you want to call it invest or not, just being a friend, but then you get to see the fruit down the road.
That's right.
I'm proud of you. I mean, God ain't done with you. I love that you're silencing the lies of God's not going to be able to use you. Tell that joker to burn what you're telling to burn. That's my little, I like to say that. But there's so much more. This ain't it. So I know this is a big deal. This podcast, big deal, but he ain't done with you.
No, and God,
just letting you know that.
Let me tell you, because I don't know that my listeners know. I've talked to Pastor Tim about this, but God's moved me into a new journey.
Let's go.
I'm doing. Just got certified as a life coach, but my goal is to help men. You know that's what I want to do. But I was a minister who fell, and who walks with the ministers, and what ministers have. The enemy's out to destroy our ministers today, our pastors. And so I'm starting this ministry where I'm walking alongside pastors who need someone that they can come talk to in private and say, man, I've got this stronghold in my life. And, missionaries are being attacked. Every day we have missionaries that are leaving the field because of immorality and other things, because morality overseas is, I mean, you think America's bad, go overseas and see it, right? And pornography, addiction. Pornography seems to be one of the number one thing that takes out ministers.
Yeah, that's right.
Because that's something that can be done in secret. And the truth is, a lot of guys listening to this right now, they battle with it.
Yeah,
somewhere between 60 to 80% of men struggle with pornography.
Yeah.
It's a pandemic.
Yeah.
And that's what brought me down, and which is my story. But Brian, I want to thank you so much for being on my podcast today, man. I
love it.
It's good. You brought the energy, and I just want to tell my listeners out there, when God's tugging on you, like Brian said, obey the nudge, man. Obey the nudge.
Obey the nudge.
What can happen? God's going to have you. God's not set us up for failure, right?
That's right.
So obey it. Until next time, just keep being intentional. Thank you, guys. We got it.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Intentional Guy Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show and got some real value out of it. Tell others what you learned and share the podcast if you think they would benefit from it too. Please follow us on your favorite podcast platform, leave a review, and consider checking out our website, intentionalguy.org, to learn more about us and get in touch. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.